G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Christie David, and I run a mortgage broking business called Atelier Wealth, where we help property investors start out and scale up their property portfolios. And the reason why I bring out these podcast episodes is because we have a lot of frequently asked questions from our clients, and this type of medium is great where clients can go off, listen to information at their own pace, digest it, and then come back with questions that they've got after that. So that's very much why this was born. As part of that, though, we like to bring in guests, and you often hear me refer to them as best in breed. So there's people who have a very special skill set or knowledge or insight that then they can share their knowledge with yourself as well. I'm really, really excited to bring in Rhys Rogers from Before You Bid into the studio and onto the podcast. G'day, mate. How you doing?
Very, very well. Thanks for having us.
Mate, thanks for being here. And look, we've got an interesting connection because I'm saying we started almost around the same time. And I remember I had my first office that was over in Alexandria, and you came in with this idea of Before You Bid. I'm like, that's an interesting one. Tell me more about this. And kind of how our business has started, the evolution, and then some of the rules that you and I have broken. We'll touch on that in a second. But I just want to say, mate, welcome, and how you doing?
Hey, well, it's funny. I look back on that and I was like, how was Aaron was the broking? We met along those lines. We thought the broking channel was going to be such a big part of our business, but it's been a hard one to crack. But we haven't given up. But we can jump into that a bit
Absolutely.
later.
We'll talk about that. But before we start, two things. One, the Rhys story, so a little bit about yourself personally and professionally, and then and a bit your own journey around building Before You Bid as well. So take us through. I know you've just had you've got a young baby.
Yeah, 11 month old.
Congrats.
So the Rhys story, people always find it funny that I'm the youngest of 8 children.
Wow, yeah.
Which there was just controlled chaos permanently. It's probably why you're happy to start a business, because you don't mind a bit of dysfunction in your life. But prior to Before You Bid, I used to tell people I was in corporate restructuring, a bit of a Richard Gere type personality, but the reality was I was an accountant in an insolvency firm.
I think we'll go with the first analogy.
But that was a really good kind of baseline training for starting a business, because you see a lot of, I guess, what not to do.
Yeah.
Not that you still don't make a ton of mistakes, but you're certainly very mindful of solvency and cash flow and the P&L. So did that for 8 years.
Yeah.
Had a real estate agent. It was a $8 million house in Rollara that from a bankrupt, and we're selling that through the business. And the real estate agent was complaining to me about having to open up the property twice for a building and pest inspection.
Yeah.
And I was like, why don't they share it? He said, the first person doesn't make it available. So they never, because they don't get anything back from it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the little light bulb moment. Then I kind of started writing out a little business plan. What else can we add to this? Strata Reports, most obvious.
Yeah.
We do a bit of conveyancing stuff as well. And then, went over to my brother's place and wrote up a business plan and launched it about 6 months later.
Fantastic. Yeah. There you go. And you mentioned your brother there as well. So your brother's come along the journey with you as well.
Reluctantly from his wife, I was saying earlier, but he was in a nice, well-paying job at UBS as a director there.
You have to pry him out of there, wouldn't you?
So he took 4 years to eventually go, okay, well, he had 3 kids and a mortgage, so it was very, very fair enough. But it took him to a point of us reaching certain milestones before his wife would be happy to let him go and entertain the little brother's business plan.
Right. So, it's a very similar scenario for us, right? Bernadette left a decent gig at Cricket New South Wales, and then her brother came and joined the team as well. So when you talk about family and business, it is a recipe. When it works, it works very, very well. As long as you I think you mentioned when we had a chat before, which was, I do this, he does this, and a very clear function that I manage or you manage, and without stepping on each other's toes, which is probably where it comes unstuck a little bit.
Definitely. Well, I've got 7 siblings, and there's one, maybe 2 I could start a business with. It's definitely, there's, people say don't do business with family and friends. But with Jordan, we shared a bedroom for 14 years, so we can share a business.
I like it. Fantastic. And So you mentioned about how this kind of light bulb moment has gone off before you bid. So take me through for the uninitiated. How does it work, and what are the mechanics behind before you bid?
Yeah, so originally it's changed quite a lot over the 7 years, as you can imagine. Originally we had the idea of a kind of very consumer-focused product where to go to that idea, you'd get a building and pest inspection report. Let's say me and you, Aaron, were looking at the same property.
Yep.
I'd pay $499 for it. Then the agent would give you a link as the next buyer who's come through and said, hey, look, if you want this building and pest inspection report, it's available for $299.
Yep.
As soon as you pay that $299, I would get $200 back on my credit card. Someone else comes along, they pay $199, we get another $100 back. Another person comes along, pays $149, we get another $50 back. So it's a way of sharing the cost of those reports between a number of buyers, so you're not spending $500-$600 every time.
Yep.
But you're still getting the due diligence you need when looking at a property. A lot of our business now, and it's getting to about a 50-50, is real estate agents getting these reports up front and making it available for buyers at a discounted rate or for free.
Okay.
So that people can more easily look at the properties they're selling and put an offer in, unconditional of a building and pest inspection.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of benefits to that. We don't really mind either way, whether it comes from the consumer channel or the vendor or agent channel. But it's all about, building transparency around the sale and reducing the cost of these reports.
Oh, well done. And so when I talk to clients, I'm like, have you done your due diligence? And I'm like, what do you mean? Who organises the Strata reports? Who organises the building pest? And I've got to often do that again. I mean, in a hot market, there wasn't sometimes the time. Like there wasn't, the 2 or 3 days to then get a building and pest report done and get that all looked at. So I'm assuming you've probably seen some data that says people that just bought without doing any.
Yeah, what are they? I should know this. The conveyancing term, I think it's a 33W or something where you can 66W. Sorry. Yep. Nick just got to double that.
2 of those and you got it.
Yeah. But it was interesting, the data we saw in downloads per listing. So it peaked in that kind of end of 2021 where the average listing had 2.8 downloads per report, if that makes sense. Yep. So every time a report was done, there'd be another 2.8 downloads on that report. Okay. That dropped to the lowest we've had in 7 years on the July last year, where it's down at 1.4.
Right.
So half as many people downloading reports, and that was reflective, obviously, the interest rate rising, and also just half as many people going through open homes.
Yeah. Okay.
So we've also got a product called BYB Assist, which is a text messaging solution which goes to every single person who goes through an open home. Yeah. Got nearly 500 offices across the country have got that enabled. So we can kind of see how many people are going through opens, and that literally dropped in half as well. So it kind of followed the download rates of the building and pest and Strata reports.
There you go.
Which was interesting to see, but the start of this year it's picked back up. So we're seeing kind of the download rates returning back to average. I don't expect to see them back up at what we were seeing.
I mean, that's an intensity that's a wave that comes through every, I don't know, 10
blue
years or
moon.
something.
Yeah. But it seems to be returning to normal. I think it's early days, but certainly January's been a good one for us.
It feels like that. Even, I guess, market sentiment is we've gone through the hardest, which was 8 consecutive rate rises, and now it's like, it's a reality. It's steady in. And I think people are going, well, hang on, I can choose to sit on the sidelines or be an active buyer and then getting boots on the ground. We're seeing that consistently from open homes for buyers, but also you see that from the rental side as well, which, I mean, when you see lines that are 20, 30 deep, you're going, we could rent or we could potentially buy. And I think people are on the fence.
Making that choice.
Yeah. Perfect. So take me through and again, I'll just touch on another question that clients have, which is that the agent's providing this building and pest report, is it truly independent or is it in the vendor's favour? And it's, well, actually, it is an independent third party that's going through this. So I'm sure that's probably one of the questions that comes up.
There's kind of 2 interesting questions around the reports that I always get.
Yep.
One is, do I actually need one?
Yeah, okay.
Which for building and pests, I say 9 times out of 10 you might not, but you don't want to be that one.
Yeah, okay.
So it's like getting, NRMA towing. Like I've never been picked up. Had to get my car towed because it's broken down. But that one time I do, I'll be like, geez, I wish I'd paid that $100 NRMA.
Yeah.
Similarly with the building and pest inspection report, when they find something, they find something, and and that can be 40, 50, 100 grand problem, which you'll be kicking yourself you didn't know about. So I always recommend it, unless it's a new build. It's a different type of thing. You get a handover inspection, and generally the agent might have one of them to provide.
But even on the new builds, I mean, I've seen a rise in like pre-inspection. There's like there's independent parties that will now go and make sure that it's all done to a certain
the handover and
right?
And
because again, the untrained eye doesn't know what to look for sometimes.
No, and I mean that's a different conversation, but there is, you've got kind of warranties against the builder as well in those instances where you don't on an older property. So I would say definitely on an older property, you're almost always getting one, unless you're planning on knocking the whole thing down and building something new. There's not much point.
Yeah.
Strata reports, it's complete insanity to not get a strata report if you're buying a unit.
Okay. Why is that?
Because you can be hit for a special levy, and you have to pay it, and the quarterly levies, you have to pay them. Like there's no I can building and pest. There's a problem in the garage. I can fix it up in 2 years' time. Maybe you should fix it up now because it's going to be a bigger problem in 2 years' time. But that's your own prerogative. But with a strata report, so no, you need to pay this today. And if you don't have that money, there's issues and repercussions, and particularly cladding issues that have come up.
They're probably the big ones that are now catching buyers unaware, which is the cladding. There's environmental codes as well that I feel like
fire safety. So a friend of mine, he has an apartment in Potts Point. He got hit up for 110 grand because of the fire safety. So
age of buildings is another one as well. So sometimes these older buildings now need to come up to code as well.
So with a strata report, just 100% get one. And with the building and pest, unless you're knocking it down or it's a new build, I'd strongly recommend getting one as well.
Okay. So I guess, the question behind that question was, can I trust this report? And what you're saying is, well, this is independently done. So it doesn't matter if it's provided by the agent.
Well, we went off track a little bit there. But with before you bid, not to plug it too much on this, but we check every single inspector's insured. So there's an estimate that 70% of building and pest and strata inspectors out there aren't insured properly. To do the reports they're doing. So getting the insurance is the hardest thing for these tradesmen.
Okay.
Because the insurers have quite stringent, qualifications they need to have or experience that they need to have. So we make sure they've got that. So on our platform that they're insured. But in terms of if you're getting these agent reports, there is definitely a skepticism to be had there. What you want to check is who the inspector is.
Okay.
And look them up. Make sure that you can maybe check their Google reviews or whatever, or you can call them and ask.
Give them a call. That's exactly what a lot of them will say, which is, hey mate, give me a call. Let's have a chat about. Is this a deal breaker or a deal maker, for example?
Well, that's post buying the report. I'm talking about pre-buying the report. I'll do a bit of research on the inspector. Okay. Just and not in all instances, but in some instances, if you've got a doubt, just do a bit of research on the inspector. Make sure there are inspectors out there we've had to kick off our panel because they were handwritten reports, which I was like, well, is this really something that someone's meant to pay for? And that there's potential that have been in there for 5-10 minutes. So we've got some kind of processes internally that make sure we remove those inspectors from our panel once it's been highlighted. But you should definitely just check out who the inspector is before downloading. But at the end of the day, if they've got insurance, that insurance should carry through to you as the buyer. And if there is something, that's material that's missing, then you may have a claim against that inspector. So there is a level, they can't go too rogue on it. So there is a level of trust there that you can have.
Oh, beautiful. Just mentioned before about what's in the reports, and we've had a chat with property inspectors, building inspectors in the past. So if you're kind of curious to see what they do, check out one of our previous episodes. But for this conversation, in the report, and you probably had a chat from your own research when people look at these reports, what is in that report that's going to get you closer to making an offer as opposed to what's going to get you out? This is a property that gets struck off the list, for example, and how much are people getting caught up in that that part of it.
And so there's a funny rule in building and pest inspection reports I heard years ago, which is quite dodgy. They call it the 2-1 rule of building and pest inspection. So you can think about inspector. Think about, Aaron, your job when you started, how hard it was to get a client.
Yeah.
So what they'll do is they'll get a client and they'll bomb a property, what they call bombing a property. So they'll say, oh, this is terrible. You can't possibly buy this thing. Look at all these problems. $600. Thank you very much.
Right.
Then they'll get another one off you, bomb the property, $600. Thank you very much. Third one, oh, no, this place is okay. So it's the 2-1 rule. So they've got $1,800 off you and you're going, how good was my building and pest inspector? They just saved me from those 2 properties before, when really, it's a way of building up their income. So I don't think the report should be looked at as, do I go ahead and buy this property? You like the property, you've bought the report, you're thinking about the property, you obviously can picture yourself living in it. It's more how much are you paying for that property?
Yeah, okay.
So if you go, look, these are, every property in the country would have $5,000 to $15,000 worth of things that you should probably repair when you go in there. Now, but
they've been living with some things that they're happy to accept. I'm coming in, you get this all the time whenever you get a new renter. They're like, oh, this needs to be done purely from a changeover. Like that's their standard now, and the last tenant was willing to accept it. The same would be when you're living in a property. I'm like, I'm happy to kind of compromise, and someone buying it, I want a new property. It's like, well, hang on, this is a used property, and it's wear and tear.
Yeah, it's a used car. Exactly. That's a good term, actually. It's a used property.
Yeah.
But it's more, looking at, is there something there that's worth, a lot to repair, and do I want to say, okay, I'm not paying $900,000 anymore. I've got to pay $875 or $850. I see it more as a negotiation than I don't want to live in this property. Because there's a reason you've looked at the property, and there's a reason you've got that report, and you must have some sort of interest in it. Yeah.
And I guess we've got a few different parties that are coming into it, right? So you got obviously someone like a broker or a bank, which is helping with your loan, and they're trying to get to approval as quickly as possible. Then you've got building in Pest, maybe through an inspector, and then you've got your conveyancer. So who is guiding the client through this part of it, the due diligence side? Because it's like the broker's a little bit hands off because it's like all about the finance. The building and pest inspector, they've done their report, so it's like, I'm going to talk you through it, but I can't help you make an offer or what's, maybe a given ballpark. And then the conveyancer is like, well, I'm here to review the contract to sell. So
and the conveyancer and, I would say the broker and the selling agent, and if you've got a buyer's agent, the buyer's agent, they all want the deal to close.
That's right. So let's be really open about it. Everyone wants the deal done.
The deal to close because everyone gets gets fed that way. You want a good buyer's agent, obviously, who'll and there are good ones out there who will, move you away from really well for you. I know plenty. Some of them get a bad rap, but there's some really good, good ones out there.
Phenomenal ones. I was talking to you before. Like, we use the buyer's agent. People are like, well, all the agents in the area. I'm like, yeah, but I'm still paying for someone's expertise as well.
And time.
Correct.
I think that we saw an estimate that it's 148 hours. I'm kind of making this up. It's somewhere between 120 and 180 anyway.
Yeah.
But that amount of hours the average person spends finding the property they end up buying. So if you're in a moderately high paying job and you do your hourly rate,
spot on.
That's worth it to get that buyer's agent. For sure. But in terms of advocating for the buyer, the building and pest inspector doesn't really have a horse in the race. They've been paid.
Yeah.
So not a bad person to call, but they're not going to tell you whether you should, they're just going to say this is a ballpark or this might cost you, this is how much it might cost to fix these issues. So in terms of making the decision, it's still the person, unfortunately.
Buyer beware still.
Buyer beware. But just have more information when you're making that decision.
Yeah, well said. I guess it almost circles back to do it yourself, a DIY model versus a team effort and trying to get a better outcome as a team than flying solo and trying to do it yourself. Yeah. Potentially.
Yeah, and some people can do it themselves, right? Yeah. They've got that personality, but a lot of people, like I haven't bought a property yet, which people find funny given the business I run. But when that day does come, I'm pretty sure I'll use a buyer's agent to do it.
Yeah. Perfect. So when it comes to before you bid and how you work from a distribution perspective and how a customer gets involved. Take us through some of the mechanics.
There's a couple of different ways. So as I said, a bit over 50% of our business is agents, having these reports up front, making it available. So you'll go to an open home, you'll see a little QR code. It'll have the inspector's details. It'll have our little logo on the top corner. You just scan it and it takes you through the download funnel.
Yeah.
Then the other way is coming to our website direct. So, and that's that consumer model, that consumer cashback model I mentioned. So we internally, it's a bit of internal lingo, but we say that our vendor models and then our consumer model, which is like the more people that buy it, the more cash you get back. So that can be found just by going to beforeyoubid.com.au. We're on nearly every listing on the domain app and website as well. So you'll see a little building and pest or a little strata report button there.
Yeah.
That will also tell you if there's reports already done through us, so you can see if there's a discounted report available.
Nice.
It's been really interesting actually with that partnership with Domain, seeing some people, particularly Strata Reports, they're downloading the reports before they see the property.
Ah, okay.
Because they're like, well, I just need to know what the quarterly levies, special levies, etc., what's going on in the building before I get there, because there is half a chance that that strikes it off for me because I won't be able to afford it.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. It's almost better you figure that out before you get there and then fall in love with the property. And now you've got to backpedal a little bit because now you've got to talk yourself out of the deal as opposed to I'm not even going to turn up to the property. And
I mean, generally they turn up still, but at least they've got a bit more information.
I think it's great. To that point, though, we'll tell our clients, go out there and look at as many properties as you can.
Yeah.
Physically get on boots on the ground, go out there and pound the pavement. You need to get a trained eye for, the photos versus actually what's in reality, can you see yourself living there, the lifestyle, also the aspect, for example, you get a feel for design and a little bit of inspiration. So I think for us...
Or you get really tired. I don't watch Lux listings, which a few people in my office do, but someone in my office was saying that, I'm not going to explain the episode perfectly, but that Gavin Rubinstein was saying to one of his team, do you know whether they've looked at a lot of properties or not? And the guy's like, why does that matter? Yeah. He's like, well, if they've looked at a lot of properties, they're probably really tired and ready to buy.
Yeah, buyer fatigue.
Yeah, but if it's the first one they've come through, then they're still a lot of energy. They're probably not going to be ready for another month or two. Which I found pretty funny.
Yeah, mate, totally. And I think they find the first one, they find the great one too early, and like, there's got to be a better one out there. And it's like, hang on, mate, this is ticking all the boxes. And I think for you and I, when we're this type of purchase, you're like, it's such a conundrum for a lot of people. It's like, but that's ticking the boxes. Why aren't we making the offer? It's like, because sometimes it's too good to be true. It's happened too quickly.
Early. Which is going to happen. Like there's
dating,
a percentage of things it's going to happen in that first person you meet. You're dating, that first swipe on Tinder.
Yeah, there you go.
That was your wife, but you just wanted to keep swiping. You just wanted to see, you're like, no, you made a mistake there. And you can't go back.
Correct, perfect. I mean, we've got clients that are kind of all over Australia and listeners as well. So does it vary state to state, and what do we need to be wary about?
Yeah, so Strata Reports is pretty much an East Coast term.
Okay.
Strata Reports are funnily enough, so in nearly every other state, there's compulsory disclosure requirements around units about, you've got to let buyers know certain things to do with the property. New South Wales is the only one that's fully buyer beware, but the Strata Reports in New South Wales are way more detailed than you get anywhere else in any other state because it is buyer beware.
Yep.
So I find that always really interesting. Strata Reports are now starting to grow quite strongly in Queensland and Victoria, even though they've got these disclosure requirements from the seller.
Yeah.
Because people, I think, have moved from New South Wales and got these reports or got, from the agent going, what? There's still so much missing. So that's kind of one interesting tidbit.
Yeah.
In the ACT, it's compulsory to provide a Strata Report Light and a building and pest inspection with every sale.
Okay.
So you'll get one. Funnily enough, New South Wales nearly went down that path as well about 6 years ago. And we did a little bit of research into the ACT market, and the top buyers agents and top conveyancers were still recommending to their client, get your own if this certain inspector's done
the
building and pest. So there are certain building and pest inspectors which the people who live there know and go, look, I wouldn't trust that report at all. So that kind of means, and you have to pay, when you buy the property in the ACT, you have to pay for the report itself when you're the buyer. So that can be $900 to $1,400. Then you've paid for your own because you don't trust it, which is another $600-700. So you've just spent $2,100 on it. So it's one of those things where the regulation probably, whoever wrote it in the ACT probably thought, of course, it's a great idea, but it's actually the worst, I reckon, regulation in the country. It's buy beware is better than that, I think.
Okay.
New South Wales has got some good laws around compulsory disclosure from agents if a report has been done. So if one of our consumer orders gets done, we send a link to the agent. They have to send that to every contract holder and say, hey, there's a report that's been done.
Oh, right, okay.
Not too many people know that, including the agents themselves, but it's an interesting difference. WA's also got an interesting. WA should be our biggest market, and we've only just kind of launched it a little while ago. But when you buy a property in WA, you get what we'd call on the East Coast a kind of cooling off to get a building and pest inspection. But that building and pest inspection in the WA market, it has to find major or structural defects. Yeah. Which then the seller can fix, and you still have to buy it. Yeah, okay. So there's no price chipping, there's no pulling out. It is, cool, I fixed it. And you've got to kind of go, okay, well, I guess they fixed it to the standard that I would expect. So you should definitely be buying the building and pest inspection before having your offer accepted in WA. But people, the mindset's the opposite. They're like, no, I'll just get it accepted and then I'll get my building and pest. And I'm like, you can't do anything after that. Like there's the benefit of the building and pest is finding stuff out and either pulling out because there's too much or, negotiate the price because you believe it's this much to fix. Nice one. You don't get either of those options in WA. So beautiful. You should definitely get the reports before. Good to know. And I guess it's become such a borderless country now in terms of people buying, moving interstate, for example, for work and hybrid models of living and working. And then people's borderless investing now has become so popular as well. You wouldn't know this. Again, if you went down the DIY model, buyers agents probably got a good handle on this as well, right? Yeah, and local. Yeah, I mean, you probably go a local buyer's agent. Yeah. There was a company recently that approached us who are doing kind of an online. They've got a bunch of kind of data scientists doing a buyer's agency model. I just can't quite recall the name, but they do it across the whole of Australia. And I was like, oh, where are you looking at now? And not one part of them is looking in Sydney. Yeah. They're like, nah, there's this suburb here in Queensland and there's this one over in South Australia, that's what the analytics are telling us you'll get a good deal on. So I would love to give them a plug, but anyway. That's right, you find them, we'll bring them on and have a chat about it. But to go on that, it's probably a local, right? You might be inclined to get a local buyer's agent for WA or for South Australia. Yeah, okay. Instead of someone here who might be potentially, unless that's their specialty, but they might not know what the where the bargains are in different states. And you mentioned at the very start, because you get a fairly good litmus test on the market and a read on what's going on. So, people coming through inspections and people downloading reports. We've said that the start of the year has been fairly active. Been good, yeah. So our text messaging service, that one I mentioned, we're kind of seeing 20% more people going through open homes than they were in November, December. Okay. Which sometimes there's a January kick, but it's played on a bit longer than that January kick would have. Yeah. And repurchase rates seem to be trending back up towards, they dropped to 1.4, 1.5, and they're kind of back up to 1.9. So it seems like I don't think that's going to result in some kind of price booming again. I think it's just vendors are like, okay, well, my property's worth 15, 20% less in the markets where we're probably biggest. There's always general attrition in the market. Someone's getting married, kids, upgrade, downgrade, divorce, death. Like there's just general movement in the market that you could say that rates will put the handbrake on people selling or the market, but people have got to get on with life. Got to get on. And there's a little bit, I don't know, the commentary doesn't seem to be saying this, but just from my conversations, I'm just thinking about this one with a really good agency up in Hornsby, in Sydney, for those who don't know it. But they kind of sell between 250, 300 properties a year. Like
nice.
Good
amount.
Good office. I think there's 4 agents.
Yeah.
So they're all doing pretty good numbers. 5 agents, sorry, all doing good numbers. And they sold like barely anything, like the worst. One of the agents who sells 80 a year, he sold 1 in November, December.
Yeah, right.
Which is very, very bad.
Yeah.
And they had 24 listings last month, in January, sorry, and they said 18 of them were investors whose finance was just about to come up for coming off fixed, going to variable, and they're just like, we just can't do this. Units up in Hornsby, and they're underwater, 150 grand, and they're just like, yep, that's fine. Let's just cut that loss.
Interesting.
So there'll be a little bit of that. I maybe not the distress like banks reclaiming type sales, but more people going.
Investors just going, look, I'm just going to cash out, and they probably bought it at a good time if they bought those units. Hopefully they didn't buy at the peak, but they're just going to cash out.
Have, unfortunately, but hopefully they don't lose too much. But yeah, that's interesting. I think we'll definitely see some of that, but it won't play out in the big headlines of banks repossessing countless homes, but more be people making a decision 3-4 months before they come off fixed.
Correct.
And just going, look, this just isn't worth it anymore.
Oh, there's just no way to sugarcoat. I mean, 8 consecutive rate rises, nothing like it we've experienced, and then coming into a fixed rate cliff that we all know about. It's something's got to give. Incomes are finite. Expenses have gone up 40%. Something's got to give.
Yeah. And you'd know better than me, but there's that stress test the banks are doing, right? Correct. They used to have it at 7.5%, and then they dropped it to 2.5% above the cash rate. Is that right?
Yeah, but they're centered variable. Yeah.
And now that's probably looking like a bad decision.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in hindsight, like, it was great. It freed up, people's borrowing capacities, and now it's like, well, hang on, what you borrowed, you can't even get that now. It's a very tough conversation to have with a lot of people, especially as they're feeling the pinch from other parts of their lifestyle, which is rising petrol, rising energy, rising groceries, for example. It's like, man, households need a bit of a break here as well. And I was reading a stat as people went back to school that in Queensland, up to 17% of households that had their kids in private schools were taking them out and moving them into public schools. I'm like, that's a very bold move. There's no ego in that. I'm taking my child out of a private school, moving them to public because we just can't afford it. Like, these are decisions that households have to make because of where we are at the moment. I think there's some sense in those decisions as well. Like there's sense in doing your due diligence before you pull the trigger on, I don't know, a property that's going to be worth at least $1 million plus in this current market. Bruce, I want to say thank you very much for sharing your insights and your knowledge, man. I think seeing your own journey is a testament to what you're building and what you have built, mate. So congratulations on that side, and congrats on building your family as well. I know I don't know which is easier sometimes, business or family.
Marry well, and it's definitely easier with a family.
Well said. No, you've earned some brownie points with that answer. I'll steal that. And but what the big message for me is when you're doing your due diligence, knowing who to trust and what to read and what to digest and take out of that as well. So what we will do is we'll include a link to before you bid. So I think this is going to become a really handy tool for a lot of our potential buyers as they go through that, trying to make sure that if they're going to do their due diligence, that they're not getting kind of pinged every time for a report. Hopefully they can share the costs as well, mate. But I want to say thank you very much. And
appreciate it.
Onwards and upwards.
Great to chat.
Yeah, thanks. Cheers, mate. That's a wrap for another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. If you found it helpful, one, we'd love a review, but more importantly, we'd love to hear from you if you've got any questions that you'd like answered as well. I'm your host, Aaron. Until next time, take care.